in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Oh, hello, and welcome to another episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. The place to be for the highest, I tell you, level conversations on the most relevant topics out here. And today we're saying that financial literacy and financial risk is very important, and even more so these days. We live in a financialized economy, and we live in an economic planet. And it's very important in order to be able to meet the economic demands of the day to understand the game, even more so than before. Even more so than before. Because as we know, things are not perhaps as smooth as they once were. Interest rates perhaps are not as low as they once were. People are not able to afford homes and pass through certain milestones at the age that they used to. Okay, we know about all this data. We understand all this. Okay, crypto comes into the scene and all that kind of stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, click that like button, share the stream as you come in. We got an all-star panel ready to tackle this topic today. So, let's start like this. I mentioned financial literacy and financial risk. These things are generally speaking intertwined. The more you're able to understand and have facility with financial markets, the more you're able to take risks and perhaps have good outcomes in this risk taking. Okay. And there's regulations around there too, which we'll get into. But Kaizo, do you think that the average man has enough access and understanding to financial markets? Does he have enough of that? And what is enough? Enough to meet the economic demands, or enough as you would deem to be enough? Does the average man have enough of this? Let's start with Kaizo.
I don't think the average man has enough, if anything, when it comes to financial literacy. So ultimately, be it skill, be it willingness.
Now, let me ask you to. I'm going to make a statement and let me know if this is correct. This is not because financial literacy is like quantum physics, is it? It's not because it's particularly difficult, right? Or am I correct there? Or what's going on there? So there's just something that's important, and it really isn't that complicated, right? So why the lack of literacy, and maybe there are emotional reasons for that, and blah, blah, blah. And then maybe who benefits from it and so on and so forth. Just speak a little bit about your answer here, saying that they do not have it. Qualify that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the average man doesn't have it. Yeah, you're right. It's not because of it's complex or, out of reach from a technical perspective. It tends to be cultural. And, people say, well, I wasn't taught X, but it's more than that. In this case, the average man is what we call a subsistence entrepreneur. Before, let's say, modern societies, you'd have, let's say, farms. Maybe the average man would have been working on a farm as a serf and paying back some money in terms of food or, his animals to the person lending in the land. Now, he didn't think to expand and turn it into a business and then escape that life of serfdom and now become the landowner. So the average man is that same man. And in this new modern landscape of financial literacy being a way to escape poverty, he still is living a subsistence lifestyle. In this case, instead of being an entrepreneur, in most cases, he's now a subsistence employee. So ultimately, it's not a lack of intelligence, or financial literacy is nothing to do with quantum physics in terms of hardness. It's simply to do with the nature of the average man and what probably evolutionary biology has instilled in his being.
Okay. Now, Dr. Thunder, first of all, while we shout out Dati Galdem for the very generous $5, £5 super chat. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Thunder, do you think the average man has enough of this financial know-how in order to understand and have access to financial markets to meet the demands, the economic demands, and be able to get a passport? I don't know. Go ahead.
I don't think the issue is related to do they have the knowledge or access to the knowledge. I think the issue is more based on uh, sort of modeling, like what are other people doing in your community? What are other men doing? How do they spend their money? Do they save their money, or do they, waste their money on spending rims and stuff to impress women? You know, it's more of that sort of kind of issue, because you can get on you know on YouTube. You could do a Google search. You can ask, Chat GPT, to write you an article telling you all the things that you need to do, to become financially literate. You can even ask Chat GPT to write you a year-to-year plan of how to get yourself out of debt, of how to, you know, uh, develop financial independence, all that kind of stuff. It's not a matter of if the information is available or if individuals either, you know, Google know it or they actually know the information or not. It's more of but what are other people doing that, that are your examples? And are there enough people insisting that you, straighten up and fly right, as it were, get this knowledge and actually put it into action. Actions are the thing that actually do something, right? It's not necessarily the information. You could know all kinds of stuff. It's like, what are your feet actually doing? That's actually the most important. Yeah, there's a biblical principle. I'll end here. What is it? It's not what the man eats that defiles the man. It's what comes out of the man. It's what the man says that defiles the man. Right. So it's like the work. It's the effort that you put forth. It's not what goes into you. It's what comes out of you. So.
Very, very nicely put. Okay, so Kaizo gave the answer of something cultural. You emphasize, make it more granular regarding, hey, what are the people around me? What are these models and influences doing? LAR, do you think the average person has enough of this access to this information, and perhaps not just access to information, but access to the for example, if I were to ask the average man what is a security versus a commodity, right? Now that's not a very complex thing, but and it's not something that most people should think they should know. However, the economic landscape is not from the past. People are looking backward, and that's how typically people do. But you're in a situation now where you should know maybe what an equity is, versus a bond, right? What is a commodity versus a security, and all that kind of crap. LAR, do you think the average man has enough of this knowledge to meet the economic demands, or what's going on there?
I think the average man has a base knowledge, but the average man is like a sharecropper nowadays. So the average man needs more capital to actually be able to, how can I say, expand their knowledge and be able to utilize the information.
Mhm. Mr. Lion Legal, what are your thoughts on this basic question, sir?
Well, thank you for having me on the panel. The question is, does the average person have access to financial information?
Well, let me rephrase it. Does he have enough, or do they demonstrate enough knowledge and also access, not to necessarily the information, but to the instruments? Like, is it do they understand how to get into a particular, let's say for example, they're like, hey, you know what, the interest rate is going to drop in 6 months, therefore you should go buy this long dated treasury bills. Do they even know where to go ahead and get those treasury bills, or what that means, or do they demonstrate that in your view? Could there be
Okay,
more of that? Yeah.
so they absolutely have access, especially now. In fact, now they have more access than they did in the past. Imagine if you had to find out about securities, treasuries, commodities in 1980, 87, 1993 versus now. Now you don't even need to go to your computer to find it out on the internet. You can use your phone to understand this. Do they have knowledge? No, they don't. No, they don't. If they did, less people, I'm sure, this may be controversial, but less people would invest in Bitcoin. Less people would invest when the stock market goes up as opposed to when it goes down. Do Can people interpret the importance of the income statement, of the balance sheet? Can they tell you what is the most important factor in understanding if a company is going to be profitable into the future and is healthy financially? If I ask the average person, what is the most important factor that shows the health of a company? Most people would say profit. Of course, it makes sense, right? Wrong. That is not what tells you if a company is going to be healthy into the future and if you should invest in it, whether that investment is stock or buying a share of a private company. What actually tells you if it's healthy or not is the free cash flow. The free cash flow, because that will tell you how likely it will be able to cover its bills, especially in the short term, if it can expand, if there's a market for it. It is for the like the products it has. That's what it tells you. Profit does not really tell you that. So people don't have the knowledge, but the question is, you want to compete in a marketplace, in the stock market, compete in private equity. If you're buying companies, if you're surrounded by the average person on the street that has more knowledge than you do, that has more information than you do, what is your outcome going to look like in that instance? And that's what it really comes down to. No, they don't have the understanding, they don't have the um, knowledge, but that is because it's not easy to get that. You would have to sit down and concentrate. Even if you study economics at a higher education institution, a university, you will still not know simple things such as how to conduct your lifestyle in a fiscally responsible way. You know, a lot of people that have high income who are professionals are in debt, even though they make 100,000 to 250,000, even half a million. So the access to information is there, the knowledge is not there. And then the last thing I'll say is that wealth is not simply built on knowledge. Wealth is also built on adopting the appropriate financially responsible behaviors. It's actually a behavior. How much do you spend? Do you spend more than you earn? Do you like to buy a lot of luxury items that you can't afford? If you have those items, do you put them on credit? And then understanding finance. Do you invest in the right products that you understand too? Are you interested in stocks as opposed to real estate, things of that sort? So it's more of a behavior, more so than just the information. As far as the information is concerned, you can get information for free on the internet, but yet it's not just having the information, it's also being able to synthesize and analyze it too.
100%, ladies and gentlemen. As you continue to come in, make sure you share the stream, like the stream. And we're saying all this within the backdrop of the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, charging Coinbase of operating its crypto asset trading platform as an unregistered national security exchange, basically saying, hey, you guys are selling securities. Coinbase says, no, we're selling commodities. And we'll get into some of the nuances about that. And one of those has to do with being accredited versus not accredited. Okay. Now, if you don't have this knowledge, the knowledge that Lion Legal just told us that people don't have, you don't have that knowledge. And then the government comes and says, hey, I want to protect you from the market because you don't have this knowledge. And as a result, I'm going to not allow you to participate in certain early stage venture, for example, right? And certain things which are more risky, they're more volatile and whatnot. Okay. So the people who get to make money in that those things are accredited investors who have demonstrated facility with money by having money. It's about income was one of the main things by which you're qualified for this. And then they keep out the rest of the people. Okay. There's a question of who benefits by keeping out the rest of the people. And I think that it's kind of obvious. The rule may have started as a good thing. Let's protect people. But after a while, it makes sense to keep people out of certain deals, right? If you're within there, you have no incentive of bringing in new money to dilute your money and dilute your opportunities. But anyways, that is the backdrop of the conversation that we're having. But let me go ahead and ask that question to Kaizo, and then I'm gonna. Oh, you know what, Dr. Thunder, you like the fact that you were able to buy Bitcoin and Bitcoin SV from some app. I'm assuming it was kind of available to you. This is now about, hey, should I, as an adult, be able to take the risk, or should I be protected? Do you think that somebody should have blocked you from saying, hey, you know what, Dr. Thunder, you haven't passed through these particular hoops, you don't know these particular gateways, and getting accredited and so on and so forth, so you don't get to participate in this? What do you think, sir? Should you have been allowed to buy and sell that Bitcoin in 2020, I believe?
Yeah, this is an interesting problem, and the whole stream could be on this topic actually, that you just raised. So it's kind of like, total freedom where you make decisions and basically there's no protections, so that if you make a certain decision and it's a fatal decision, you die. It's just very simple. Or how much sort of other people should be involved in allowing you to make certain kinds of decisions. Okay, now we could agree, we sort of built this up from the ground, we could agree that children, minors, folks that are below a certain age, that we should protect them as much as possible. But how much of that should extend into adulthood, and especially when you consider how dumb the average person is, like just lack of knowledge about basic stuff, and there's no excuse for it. And if you consider how this relates to participating in a democracy, where there's a great deal of responsibility put on the individual to get informed about what it is that they're voting on, about policies, about agendas, about voting histories of those that they're electing or that they want to support. There's all of there's all of that. There's all this responsibility, but how many people are actually fully doing what they need to do? I'd probably argue maybe it's 2%, maybe 3%. Of the population actually are doing their sort of total due diligence. And now, if you take the next step, which is to say, okay, well, if you're not going to do the due diligence, we don't want you participating. So, of course, that conjures up certain images of taking advantage of people. What I wanted to say, taking advantage, oppression. some of these property ownership, requirements for voting in the history of this country, for instance. You know, uh, but were there good aspects to that though? Did that mean that at least the people that voted had more knowledge about the things they were voting on? But obviously, that disenfranchises a huge percentage of the population. Can you even call it democracy in that sense? So, as that relates to what it is that you're talking about, yes, I like the idea that I was allowed to buy Bitcoin. Um, I'd argue that I was at least knowledgeable enough about it so that it wasn't going to be a fatal decision. I wasn't spending my last few dollars, and I tend to do things slowly. I'm not going to say, okay, um, well, my wife needs this surgery that cost 100,000, but let me go ahead and put 100,000 into Bitcoin. The last 100,000, that's not going to be the way that I conduct myself, right? So it's a long answer, but it's hopefully it's understood what it is I'm saying.
Yes, 100%, sir. Now let's take a step back. Kaizo here. Dr. Tony just talked about the issue of financial literacy and risk. In other words, if you don't know, and we're assuming the average person doesn't know, we protect them, right? And certain people like children and so on and so forth, you want to protect. You want to also protect the society at large from the mistakes of idiots. However, generally speaking, one of the counters to some of the issues Dr. Thunder raised is the obvious, well, you let them go buy liquor and go to Vegas and buy lottos and do all kinds of crazy stuff that they could freely do and destroy themselves. However, how about when people are ready to start working and they're able to put money into a 401k, that you make them say, hey, look, you have to check this box if you want to take this class to become an accredited investor so you can invest in these other classes of things, right? And oh, okay, cool. Now I'm kind of forced into it, as opposed to just being in a place where the financial institutions tell you where to put your money, okay? And then they keep your money out of certain other places. It just seems a little like, that's a little fishy. However, but let me ask you this. Whom does the status quo benefit? In other words, this gated situation. You have somebody who's inside the gate and they have $1 million. Me, you, Dr. Thunder, and a few people, we're going to invest money. We have $1 million each, okay? And that's 10 million. We have a lot of leverage with that 10 million. And in that market, the people are competing, the companies that want to get our money, right? People asking for our investment are competing for 10 million. If we allow the horde to come in with their 401ks and their many, many millions, it messes up the game for us, right? It dilutes how much of a piece of this particular company we can get. Okay, I'm just giving one example of how somebody can be benefited from. But who benefits from the status quo of keeping certain people out, keeping certain people in, perhaps keeping certain people kind of dumb, if you will?
Right. So, okay, I don't believe necessarily it's to keep people out, who are less intelligent or less knowledgeable. Exactly. I think it's to protect the status quo, right? And as I mentioned earlier, something to do with medicine or any highly sought after career. You want to make it difficult for people to reach the top so that it's actually worthwhile endeavor for them. So it's like has a reward system. So it's a status quo being protected in order for the whole space to not go down under. Because think about it, right? If we're talking about its investments, things like hedge funds, securities, and all that stuff, you're talking about potentially having exponential levels of orders of levels of success, right? Or it could be failure, but failure is only down to, and it could be even the failure is even greater in this risk. It can go down below zero. So of course, if you're not someone who already understands finance, maybe you don't have a company backing you, or you're going to be in debt, it can now put you into obviously bankruptcy. And even the average person doesn't even know about that concept. To them, they really do pay their debts and cry about it every night. So I think ultimately it's a game they've created that benefits a certain type of person that has to unlock. You have to unlock this stage in order for you to benefit from its perks, as opposed to sort of just readily allowing it there. I mean, the other argument though is a lot of crypto millionaires were born, and in one hand it kind of reminds me of new money and how people are able to make money from new ventures, technologies, versus the old money people saying, "Oh, you guys didn't really deserve it," and trying out to close that opportunity. So yes, I think it's a
Yeah,
status quo to
good.
protect all of those things I mentioned.
Well, shout out, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today, we're talking about financial literacy and financial risk. Now, it is true that the Wall Street gang, right? Gary Gensler is the SEC chairman. He made about $100 million in Goldman Sachs. He's nice and comfortable. He's done his money the Wall Street way. You have tech bros who came in afterwards, 2000s and whatnot. They have a different ethos, generational fashions and values and whatnot. They have a kind of old different status quo too that they will want to protect. You think about the Wall Street people is they make it seem like all their crazy machinations, like the derivatives that they came up with and all the crazy money things that they did in the 80s, were all like super legit. Like, you this crypto guys, you guys just making stuff out of thin. It's like they did their thin air money magic too, okay, at the time when some of these things that they were creating were new. But that's just a sidebar there. Now, LAR, should you have this divide between accredited and
I have a
non-accredited?
comment on that, by the way.
And yeah, sure. Right after LAR, or if your comment is quick, by the way, or you know what? Never mind. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It'll be quick. First of all, crypto is not backed by anything. Not Jordan sneakers, not Fresh Air, not the Deep Blue Sea, nothing. The derivative that you spoke of, are they backed by a particular asset?
You see, due to, and I don't want to get too technical, but due to rehypothecation and leveraging, it turns out that the real backing asset is oftentimes nowhere near, it's just fractions of what the actual money being bet on is, if that makes sense, right? When they lever up
Yeah,
fractional,
sure. That's why I love speaking to you, because you're a sharp dude. Absolutely. So even if the real asset becomes remote from the ultimate derivative that you're buying, the CDO, the CDS, however, the ultimate question is, can it still be linked to a particular asset? Yes, it can. That's why people are very apprehensive about the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency system as it stands, because there is nothing that underlies it. So it's essentially based on pure speculation and the greater fool theory. You have to have somebody that's prepared to buy Bitcoin, buy a particular cryptocurrency from you at a higher price than you bought it. Otherwise, nobody's going to buy it. Whereas,
100%. You're good there. And as we go on, and maybe I'll get to this particular issue here, separating Bitcoin from the others, and see if you do that at all, because Bitcoin has kind of been declared a commodity different from the securities, and when you talk about things having a intrinsic value, we might touch on that. But LAR, should we have this kind of non-accredited investor side where people who don't know are protected from taking certain kind of crazy risk? They can go to Vegas, they can do certain other types of things, but hey, we're not going to let you pass through this gate here because let's as Kaizo said, you got to keep some kind of things not so dusty, and like, hey, sure, you can go to Vegas, but if you're going to join this club and be able to invest in Airbnb before it went public, we want you to we want to make you pass through some hoops, and we don't necessarily tell you about these hoops or make it seem like it's a rite of passage, like let's say, oh, you got to get your driver's license and other kinds of things. This one, we just kind of keep it in the back. You could spend your whole life working, having a 401k, having perhaps enough money to be able to participate in these things where you can put in a fraction of it and see the upside, but still would keep you out. What do you think about this system of the two sides? I guess LAR dropped out as I was asking the question. So Lion Legal, chime in on what you think about the two-sided deal where you have accredited, non-accredited. How would you change, if at all, that system?
I think the system is essentially there to protect people that may not exactly know what they're investing in, and unfortunately, most people don't know. And one thing that I've seen is that in order to even gain an understanding of finance, um, uh, like investment, things of that sort, it takes a lot of concentration and time too. And unfortunately, school is not going to teach you that. Universities are not going to give you that information. So, being an accredited investor, is that a bad thing? I don't think that that designation is particularly harmful. Uh, should dispensation be given in certain circumstances? Absolutely, because of the fact that you have a good ability to capture astronomical financial gains, and that should not just be kept to people in finance, because a lot of these deals are handshake deals, or they're given to people that are already rich. So even as far as morally, that should not be so. But let us take the opposite of that argument, and whereby you can imagine a situation where there are no or there is no particular designation between accredited and unaccredited investor. You have been on YouTube, Instagram, you've seen a lot of these people selling things, stating that invest in Bitcoin, invest in this company, invest in that company, and you've seen companies that have gone bankrupt, given the fact that people don't particularly know what they're investing in. Would you feel comfortable if somebody that's close to you, a relative, went online, said, "Wow, this seems interesting"? In fact, they don't even have to go online, because if there is no distinction between accredited and unaccredited, that means the company could advertise at an early stage to anybody. They don't even have to only advertise to a certain segment of the investor market. So they can now put their product in front of people that don't know what it is, and are hoping to get rich, and they lose everything. They lose everything. Is that a fair system? Absolutely not, because you have to be mindful and wary of the smooth talking, uh, um, very untrustworthy, spurious individuals with nefarious intent, who will sell anything and then disappear. So I don't think the designation itself is a bad thing, uh, because it does provide some protection.
Oh, fine. Now, let me ask Kaiser something here that dovetails with what you just said about smooth talking and whatnot. It occurred to me that perhaps this whole crypto saga, but let's just beginning with Bitcoin and Satoshi and whatnot, has increased the financial, or shall I say, money literacy of certain corners, or at least it has created a buzz around such a boring topic as money, as like, what is money? What is this commodity that we denominate all other goods by? How does it come about? What gives it value? What are standards such as the gold standard, and then what is fiat currency, and all these other kinds of things? Is it the case, Kaizo? Just a brief comment here, and then there's a question behind it. But could the crypto mania actually have increased the financial literacy overall? It is a way of asking you, do you think that Bitcoin or crypto so far has been a net good or bad? Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I think generally it's good by exposing how money is actually made. Think about it, right? When you're younger, right, or at least when I was younger, you ask anyone, how do these rich people actually make money? And do you know the only thing that would come up in the movies or anyone that's around you, it's stocks. But here's the thing: rich people, right, do not make money on stocks. The whatever they call day trading. No, some people do. Rich people make money on these kinds of stuff, right? Long-term investments, treasury bonds, bills, treasury bills, and all those kinds of stuff, right? This is where the money's made, whereby you have a low risk, high yield return up to 10%, etc., or a new company if you're allowed to be one of those immediate investors. So this is where people really make money in a less, let's say, gambly way. Now, you're still gambling in some sectors, as I said, investing in a new company, but this kind of information was not available at all. So yes, I think the fact that this whole crypto charade thing went on for a while, all the black YouTube used to talk about it. I think your guy, what's his name, Solo TV, he was a big proponent of this kind of stuff as an example.
You know what? Well, it's funny. Lion Legal. You're talking about people coming through, hyping certain things. Shiba Inu and this and that, and then people keeping quiet after a while after losing money. In a general sense, I have no issues with that. From two perspectives. One perspective is obviously the individual perspective, which says, okay, I came in there in 2020. I did the crypto thing. I did it. I'm still doing it. I'm very much a crypto investor, if you will, right? And one could say, okay, but Ike, you are kind of like an accredited investor type person, so it doesn't matter. But I think that even for the other, let's say the college student version of me, right, doesn't necessarily, because one of the ways to be accredited is you have to make a certain amount. So the college student version of me, should be able to get in there too, right? Now, what am I saying? I may agree with Lion Legal that, hey, yes, create this particular demarcation between accredited versus non-accredited, but the way in which you get in there shouldn't be based on how much money you get or some other kind of, it should be like a test that you take. I alluded to something like 401k, blah, 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 where you take a test, like a driving test that says, okay, I understand what a security is. I understand what a derivative is. I understand what commodities are. I understand risk and reward and blah, blah, blah. And then boom, now I'm able to buy these things. What are your thoughts about that, Lion Legal, and then Dr. Thunder? In other words, making this thing a test. But let me ask Dr. Thunder first. What are your thoughts about the making it a test, making it more accessible, so that the college student version of me can get in and get in early?
Yeah. So this whole thing. Okay. So see, because I think that could be an actual solution for the lack of the lack of what was I going to say, literacy with respect to political issues, right? So make people take a test, they prove that they actually know something, now you can vote, right? Now before everybody starts trying to throw stuff at me for saying that and saying that that's a
Civil rights.
horrible, right, civil rights and all this kind of stuff. At least the people that voted would understand what they're voting on, right? And now in that case, there's not the sort of personal. You don't pay as much if you make a bad decision voting, then you're sort of insulated from the consequences. At least the personal consequences. Society is not prevented from experiencing the consequences, but you yourself are. In this case, there's a direct penalty if you make a bad decision, because if you say, okay, I'm gonna put this money here. Oh snap! That was my wife's surgery money. Sorry, honey. But the guy sounded good. He talked a good game. He made me think that there was 100% chance that I was going to double my money, and then that guy disappeared. And and I don't know. So I don't know, something about a Nigerian prince or something. I just believed what he said. But anyhow, goodness. So okay. So part of the issue that I have with let me frame it differently. One of the things that I can say about this is this sort of desire to protect people from their own mistakes is a large degree of why the modern world is the way that it is, where you have all of the social ills. You have people that behave the way that they behave because they can get away with it. and you create all of these first world problems because you're trying to prevent people from experiencing consequences from their own behavior. And sometimes the way that you protect society from, going down the crapper is you allow some individuals to take some licks. And so trying to figure out where the sort of sweet spot is with these sorts of things is really challenging, because when you try to protect people too much, you end up with, the OnlyFans model that thinks that they're supposed to get wiped up.
Damn.
Right. So, you know what I'm saying? So anyhow, yeah, it's all related. It's all the same stuff. Obviously, we're relating this obviously to finances. That's fine, but it's really that same sort of energy and figuring out how much of it you need to do, how much protecting people from themselves. So I live in Ohio. In Ohio, there's no helmet law for riding a motorcycle. Okay. In the state of Michigan, they just recently did away with their helmet law. All right. Now, the way that they did away with the helmet law was there was a group of bikers that would ride down to the state capitol every year with no helmets on, right, as a protest to having to wear helmets. Now, I was born in Ohio. My parents are from Ohio. My dad was born in Ohio also, and he had a motorcycle from when I was a little kid. But we all wore helmets. There was no helmet law. We all wore helmets. And why did we wear helmets? We didn't wear helmets because government daddy said we need to protect you from yourself. We wore helmets because we recognized that riding motorcycles is dangerous. And if you don't have a helmet on and you get in an accident, that's it. So, and when we moved to the state of Michigan, where everyone had to wear a helmet regardless, you had more people wearing helmets. Yes, that's granted, but that wasn't necessarily creating a sort of, you weren't sort of creating this sort of personal responsibility for the outcome. It was just you were following the law because you had to follow the law. And I think there is some space, it doesn't have to be a black and white issue. I think there's gray area there. I would argue that in the modern world, we've leaned way too far in one direction. And in Western society, that's why we have a lot of these social problems that we have now.
Well put. I think you're trying to thin the herd. You're trying to call the herd. You're trying to get Darwin to do its thing. And hey, let them not wear helmets and let them exit the stage. And to the point about where to stop, I think that there were many thinkers in terms of government, Thomas Jefferson being one, that mentioned 20-year sunset rule on laws, right? So you have this law, it's meant to protect people, but once you immediately put it into effect, it starts to reverse its purpose almost immediately. It's like when you have any particular metric that becomes a target, let's say, within an organization. If I say, hey, Lion Legal, the new target now is to make X amount of calls, that becomes gameable. Whenever some metric becomes a target, it becomes gameable. And so whenever something becomes a law, there's some kind of constituency forms around it to find a way to game it, be the entrenched interest, and then protect it, put a moat around that, make sure that the law doesn't change, generally speaking. But Mr. Lion Legal, what do you think about what I said about a test? As opposed to right now where it says, oh, you have to make $200,000 or $250,000.
$1 million.
Hey, real quick before you go, Lion Legal, I'm gonna have to split but I did want to do a little bit of shameless plugging, and that is I just interviewed yesterday CGA, and that interview is likely to release tomorrow, probably midday tomorrow. So look out for that, and also make sure that you come back for Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. That'll be on my channel this Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and come back for Case Closed. Case Closed again 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. That'll also be on my channel. So I'll see you all later. Great conversation.
Indeed. Peace. So, Lion Legal, you were saying you want to increase it to $1 million, no test, keep the college.
No. It's from what I understand, unless
gotcha.
unless anybody can correct me, it is already $1 million to be considered on.
You're talking about the assets.
Net
I
worth,
was talking about income.
Income. Income is 200,000 individually, or 300,000 in conjunction with a spouse or partner.
Correct.
In each of the prior 2 years, apparently. But a test, yes, I would be in favor of a test. But I think that may also be subject to lawsuits, much like the SAT has been in conjunction with.
It's gonna be racist test.
College admission.
Oh, you think black people are not smart enough to pass these tests? Makes sense.
No. I didn't say that. I didn't. No. How do you know? It's black people? Maybe people from disadvantaged backgrounds economically might be the ones who complain about having to have a test in order to gain economically in a system whereby clearly there is some unfairness as is perceived by people from time to time. But a test, that might be, but I think that the best thing to do might be to lower some of the requirements in order for a person to be considered an accredited investor, because that would then allow a lot more people to make the decision. Do I think that the accredited investor designation should be done away with completely? Absolutely not. Absolutely, because even when things like crypto came up, I could already see the problems. I said, what is the financial basis upon which you can analyze and value this item? You can't. The only way to value it is to see who is prepared to pay more for a cryptocurrency than you are, so that once you buy it, you can sell it off to them. That is not a good way to value something. That means that you're dealing with.
Let's get into it then. Just slightly though, only slightly, because I don't want to, obviously, because I'm biased, right? I'm obviously biased, but that's not my interest here. I'm just a passive crypto person who happens to.
You got scammed by Solo TV84's crypto scam.
No, I happen to be up on the crypto thing, so I have
a buy some Shiba Inus.
But I'm just talking about.
Do you have Shiba Inus?
From a actually, I don't. But let me make a point here, Lion Legal. Let me get into a point that you're just making about the evaluation of something. You should now. Commodities, okay, are okay to be valued that way. In other words, it could be tulips, or it could be a bar of gold, or it could be some other commodity, like let's say Bitcoin. And there is no mechanism, because it's not some kind of institution like Apple, which is a stock, which is a security, that says, okay, due to the entrepreneurial or managerial efforts of certain people, I expect such and such a return. Here is their balance sheet and so on and so forth. Gold or tulips doesn't have a balance sheet. Commodities do not, right? So the point, and this is relevant to the point because this is what the case between the SEC and Coinbase is Coinbase is saying, we are trading commodities. There is no person, no organization from whom the expected rise in prices depends. It is not a company, it's a commodity. Now, do you allow, at least Lion Legal, that there are such things called commodities, whereby the evaluation is basically based on who is going to pay for your gold tomorrow?
Yes, but cryptocurrency cannot be considered a commodity, and the reason
you
for that,
you don't like the digital world for some reason.
No. Well, I'm trying to be to be analytical here, a commodity is actually a raw material or a raw material or an agricultural product. A cryptocurrency.
Let me stop you there, because you're going into examples, but you know that these examples don't necessarily cover everything. Because, for example, gold, or let's say those tulips that people were selling, or certain other kinds of commodities, don't have to
Gold is not
be.
a raw material. That's
It
not a
can
raw
be
material.
used to make things, but the value of gold is not for its
Like, like,
industrial
like,
use.
how do you get gold? How do you get gold? You have to dig for it, right?
Then let me go back again a step, right? Basically what you're saying is it's something that has a property, a physical property on earth, that we can define that this particular period element in the periodic table is gold, and we are going to put a price on it, right? Or we grow something out of the ground, it's natural, and we're going to put a price on it. It's not necessarily tied to what it can do, though.
Who
Would you agree or no?
said it was? Yeah, no, no, yeah, yeah. That part well, well, I think that intrinsically, part of the value um, of a of a commodity is also what it is used for. Because I'm sure gold will be more highly valued, like a gold bar of a particular weight will be more highly valued than a silver bar. And gold, the same quantity of or weight of gold is going to be a lot more expensive, no matter what time you're talking about, than the same weight of tulips. So I think that what it is used for actually details or indicates what the price of it will be. And cryptocurrency is not tied to anything. However, what it is, I think, in fact, and what it can be described as is a store of value. That part I would definitely agree with. It's a store of value, but it's not a commodity. It's not currency. It's not any other of those. And even if people said it was a currency, they could at least make an argument for that I think would be a lot more cogent than the other
Mhm.
arguments have been. I do apologize. It's coming up on the hour. I do have to jump off, but it's been a great panel. Thank you for having me on, Ike.
All right. Yeah, yes, no problem. Thanks for stopping by. And ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and click the like button again if you've not. And if you are new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe if you'd like to hear these highest level conversations on the most relevant topics out here. So, Kaizo, okay, commodity versus security is a big aspect of what this case between the SEC and Coinbase is about. They also sue in Binance, by the way. And me and Lion Legal just went back and forth here regarding whether cryptocurrency's status in this thing and what the real identity of a commodity is. So now let me just state something, because perhaps it's not common knowledge exactly what a commodity is. And by Lion Legal and I going back and forth on it, I think it was kind of clear. So basically, a commodity is something like a baseball card. I'm going to start from the example end of things. And a security is like Apple stock. As a matter of fact, stocks are the most common kind of securities that we kind of have out there. So a baseball card that you buy or Apple stock could go up and down in price. As a matter of fact, you might be expecting the baseball card to go up and down in price. But what's the difference between the baseball card and Apple? The Apple stock, you are believing is going to go up and down in price based on the efforts of others, based on the efforts of Steve Jobs, or managerial or entrepreneurial efforts of others. But for commodity, it doesn't matter. Gold doesn't have a gold company that you're thinking, oh yeah, the guys at Gold Company, they're great. That's why gold is going to go up. No, it's just something, a baseball card or gold or tulips or whatever, that could go up and down in price. Okay. So that's the difference between commodities and securities. Now, where do you land, Kaizo, on the debate on this lawsuit? SEC is basically saying, look, all these things that you're doing, all this cryptocurrencies, Solana, and all that kind of stuff, you guys are saying it's decentralized, but no, we're saying it is a security. Where would you land on that? Obviously, there's a spectrum here. It's a question of where you draw the line. What are your thoughts on the argument?
Yeah, I think they should just make a whole new form that includes both. Right? Why use outdated terms when the technology doesn't quite meet the standards. So ultimately, I would say they will both be commodities and securities, depending on how they're utilized by the investor.
Very well, and I think that what A Hill is saying here also kind of perhaps bridge the gap. And you might want to comment on this, plus also what Lion Legal said. There's a I alluded to the fact that there's a reluctance to go into digital space and recognize what I'm calling
Yeah.
properties.
So I'll give you an
Right?
example, right? If I'm to follow my logic, I would say yeah. So I'd agree. Something like Bitcoin, it's going to be a digital commodity, and things like some of these tokens that they utilize, or let's say on the Ethereum network, you might have an Ether. I don't know what they're called, right? And if you utilize, let's say the cryptocurrency is called Ether and the network is Ethereum. Now, Ethereum might be the digital commodity, but then this Ether would become the security because it's now acting in a form of investments in different use cases, be it whether you're transacting money or you're actually out there utilizing it as a stock or form of investment for some kind of technology. So yeah, I would say there's digital commodities, more like Bitcoin, hardline things that
So
get mined from the
may I
digital
give an
space.
example and you let me know if it's
Yeah,
I think that, for example, the ether, the commodity aspect could be like gold. And then you have gold companies or gold mines that also trade as securities. Gold mine stock is a security, gold is a commodity. Is that at all analogous to
yeah,
kind of what you're talking
exactly,
about?
exactly like that. I mean, yeah, exactly like that, right? You most of the time you're going to be trading in the speculative trades of commodities.
Hmm.
Once you build a company around it, yeah, something like that makes sense.
All right. So
But
let's take a step back again.
yeah,
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Land your plane. Land your plane.
I know it's good.
Your plane is good. So again, according to the SEC's complaint, right? They say that since 2019, Coinbase has made billions of dollars of unlawfully facilitating, the buying and selling of crypto asset securities. It's calling them securities, saying, and it listed 13, including Cardano, Solana, uh, Cosmos, saying that, hey, these are securities. And that Coinbase intertwines the traditional services of an exchange, broker, and clearing agency without having registered any of those functions with the commission, okay, as required by law. The Coinbase CEO is saying, hey, we reached out to you. When you approved us to be listed in the exchange, right? Because they have to go through an approval process by the SEC in order for Coinbase to get listed. He said, we showed you the means by which we select these particular coins, and we think that they're commodities, not securities. The means by which we determine that they're commodities and not securities. And we only accepted 10% of all the stuff that comes our way. This is the argument. Like, they're saying, hey, we reviewed a bunch of stuff. We only accepted 10%. Now, 10% still amounts to like a lot. I think they have like over 300. I don't know how many things they have listed in there, but they have a lot of stuff listed in there. But it's only 10% of what they reviewed and all that kind of stuff. Now, maybe we can segue a little bit here, Kaizo, as we kind of start landing the plane on the back third of the show. Let's talk about business. Let's talk about Black business. Let's talk about business in Africa. Let's talk about the fact that there is a certain inadequacy of business savvy customer service, uh, understanding of how to build strong verticals and whatnot. Am I crazy in starting in such a cantankerous manner here? Or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what cantankerous means, but yeah, I think that sounds good.
You think it sounds good? Okay, so now the question is, what will be some of the recommendations you would have in order to increase, let's say, let's we're going to use America as a test case, okay? But let's say we wanted to increase the percentage of businesses that are owned by Black people, because it is important it's an important aspect of lifting Black people out of their particular economic situation and whatnot, right? Not just that business is just not just business for business sake, but business because it's good. because it's good for communities and it's financial freedom and all these other kinds of things. What are some of the things that you would encourage in order to push things in that direction?
Okay, okay. Give me an example. What do you mean by encourage? Do you mean, politically? Do you mean uh, what landscape are we talking about?
Okay, let's talk about two landscapes. Let's talk about the average person who is, with general, maybe above average skill and know-how. They're going to school. They're trying to learn something. It therefore hinges, the question now hinges upon what they choose to study, how they should look at their career, and
Hmm.
vis-a-vis business and being a business and entrepreneurship and whatnot. And then also, how should both maybe the consumer class slash people who are perhaps politically conscious and civically minded individuals think with regards to maybe patronizing black businesses or doing certain things politically that would facilitate more black business. So from the individual and the other aspect.
Okay, okay. So from the individual aspect, I think. Okay, so for example, right now the U.S. Is selling I bonds, right? These are new, I say new. These are a type of bonds whereby it actually regulates for fixed interest rate as well as inflation, so it kind of protects you. So it's almost risk free unless the government fails or the dollar goes down. But even then, if your money was sitting in a bank, it would have the same deleterious effect. So ultimately, if that money wasn't done doing something with some different kind of effects, let's say the housing market, and assuming that housing market is also strong in those years, is more or less a risk-free asset or investment. So right now, US is offering a 4.2% interest rate. Most people don't know that. Most people don't even know how to get and actually buy those types of securities, right? So I would say that knowledge is base, but at the same time, obviously, there's some low hanging fruits that we haven't really done yet. A simple example is earning enough money and simple finance um, integration that actually allows you to A, not be living on hand to mouth. So the first stage would be, okay, how do we make sure that we're not living hand to mouth? Any business that we do or entrepreneurship, it shouldn't be a subsistence entrepreneurship, meaning you should not be relying on a
You
payment.
just the East African accent, you mean subsistence.
Yeah, subsistence. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
No. Yeah, so you should not be relying on, let's say, a payment from one of your vendors or clients to make that payment to someone else. You should always have, for example, a minimum of, a certain amount of money depending on what your business requires, as obviously, as a security there for you to use when you need it. That's kind of the basic stuff I would say. Low hanging fruit. Make sure Black people have integrated good financial practices, basic math.
Financial practices, basic math. Okay, so I like some of the things that you said. Let me go ahead and read a couple of things here in this article. Okay, it says that nearly 6 in 10, that's 50% of Black adults, say that supporting Black businesses or buying Black is an extremely effective strategy for moving Black people forward. So self-reportedly, people are saying that these are the things that they want. Okay, now there's some statistics here regarding the percentage of businesses that are black owned, which could go up given the general percentage in the population. And there's certain things about payroll. I'm going to say a word about that, and I also want you to respond to that as well. Smaller payrolls. Uh, Now, what that means basically is that there's a lot of solopreneuring going on and maybe hiring of contractors to do certain things. There's not a lot of vertical businesses, vertically integrated businesses that are able to have employees and whatnot. So there's a lot of maybe service providers, people with certifications. They start an LLC, maybe they are a CPA, or they have some kind of medical. They're a traveling nurse even, and they decide to open some kind of a business, open some kind of medical device or medical service or something like that, but they don't really have employees and whatnot. So people, it seems some people are taking that first step to trying out the business. They have enough financial savvy to have that extra money that you're talking about, because you have to accumulate capital in order to accumulate capital or get credit, one way or the other, get into the financial into the business game. but it seems like they're not taking the next step into what is called vertical integration,
Yeah, I
getting
think
into.
this thing
Yeah,
that
go
you
ahead.
guys are calling solopreneur, I call subsistence
Subsistence. Yeah.
entrepreneurship. Yeah, because it's the same kind of motion, right? Someone is, Kelly or Quisha is setting up a weave company, but it's not so that she can dominate the whole Queens. No, it's just so that she can make her $2,000 a month to survive, or something like that. Or so there's a lack of, let's say, empire building. Also, a belief in the future. I would say in our communities across the whole world. I think in general, Black people don't believe that the future can be betted on, and it then yields that bet. There seems to be this sort of idea of, well, if I don't use enough of my money now, what happens if I'm gone? Right? We had an example of someone that became a millionaire on the YouTube Spaces, and of course, he wasn't here anymore. So there is that element of wanting to live in the moment, and I think that's why we don't invest in the future so much. So even if, let's say, in regards to the bonds and securities and all those stuff and becoming accredited investors, we still won't do it in general. And that's the thing. So what will happen is there's a few, it'll open up the space to a few of us who otherwise didn't have access. But in general, that is not the way that we think. So ultimately, I don't think it's going to change the whole community. It will change a few people's lives. But ultimately, we don't really believe in the future. So yeah, I think if we're going to really focus on real things, is building a company from the ground and doing it the way that we understand. And those of us who do believe in the future, then they can do it. But in general, I think we need to find different strategies. This is a white man space.
Okay, let me read a piece of this here just to flesh out more this idea of small payrolls, which is an indication of what you're calling this subsistence type business, which is great for a lifestyle and also for the individual. Some people call it lifestyle business. In other words, you can live like a C-suite, somebody in a C-suite in a Fortune 500 company, making $600,000 a year. The general manager of a car dealership making $800,000 a year, but you are just running your own company, right? So it's a lifestyle company, they call it. And typically, the thing about the future that you mentioned is also appropriate here because in a business, in a lifestyle business, they're difficult to sell, right? Because they're so tied to the owner,
Yes, to the
because
individual.
they're tied to the individual. The more employees you have, the more of a engine that you're creating, some kind of a separate engine that can have its own brand, its own life into the future, and can be sold, as a matter of fact, or
Right.
inherited, as opposed to it was you and your connection of your personal connections in a particular field, just sucking money out of the market and living large, which is great for the individual. You can live as good as these other losers out there, whom are tied to some kind of corporate chain,
Hmm.
right? But you don't get to also employ Black people, which is an important part. It's not just that. What I mean is, Black people are not having a lot of Black employers because 80% of the workforce works for small businesses, not large businesses, but you have to have a lot of these uh, small businesses in order to be employing a bunch of people. So you have a small percentage, plus you're not employing a lot of them. My point is, anyways,
Hmm.
most Black-owned businesses, as it says here, have relatively small payrolls, roughly two-thirds, just 66%, then had fewer than 10 employees, right? So
Hmm.
few number of employees. Hence, it's not just a question of. So, what are your thoughts about any other things here about not only you have the fewer people? People say yes, it is important to buy Black.
Yeah,
People are not. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I mean, okay. Like I actually try to buy Black. Actually, I think you try to employ Black as well, right? In general, I mean, maybe it's just an accident. It happened that your your more pan Black ideas matched with your business ideas, right? But you didn't go out your way to, let's say, go to Ukraine or somewhere to do business. Generally, I think you do actually buy Black technically, right? Or you know employ Black. So I think if I look at my own logic, I moved to Africa so I can buy Black every day. I try not to be drinking Coca Cola and all those things because it's unhealthy. And it just happens to align with the fact that it's not a Black owned business. So if I'm to kind of say this, it is important because if you support black, what that means is black people will be seeing that this business is owned by black people, and of course, black people would be interested in actually seeing how that business works. It's like it creates an insular society within black people that will then benefit them long term. Because one of the issues with solopreneurship is inheritance. If Keisha, Keisha is the one who knows all the men in Guangzhou who she buys the weave from, right? No one else knows that. She's the one who actually knows how to get the tickets there, how to get it through customs, who she has to pay, not to pay crazy amounts of taxes, or So if only Keisha knows that, and that means Keisha's son or daughter is not going to be able to easily kind of take over it. And also, of course, when it's a solopreneurship, the person tends to kind of see it like it's baby. So they're going to be much less likely to let other people take control of key sectors. So I would say that logic of kind of helping these people develop from a solopreneurship into an actual, uh, you know, large business would help with wealth appreciation in black communities.
Interesting. It's interesting that you keep mentioning Keisha. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go ahead and click that like button. Since you got there, since you're going there, Kaizo, let's talk about the gender distribution here as we discuss percentages, statistics surrounding Black-owned businesses. Um, Completely relevant to our general topic about financial literacy, access to financial instruments. What is a commodity versus a security? What is a stock versus a derivative? What are the different kinds of derivatives that are out there, futures and whatnot? How do I get in the game? What games am I allowed to play? What games am I not allowed to play? What are the prospects that my retirement fund will actually satisfy or meet the what it's there for? You don't want to be cut unawares. If you're gonna get into a crash at the end, at least know it, Or maybe you don't want to know it. If you're gonna if you're gonna die a bloody death at the end, anyways, maybe it's good just not to know. Just ignore it until you're 80 and you're eating dog food. But
Right.
the gender divide amongst all U.S. business owners, okay, that gender divide extends to Black or African American business owners as well, though by smaller margin, it says here. Right? So, in other words, among all U.S. firms whose ownership is classified by gender, 63 were majority owned by men. Okay, so 63% men, 22% women, 15% mixed ownership. In the Black community, it's 55% men, 37% women. So relative to the larger population, Black women seem to be, what
Yeah.
would you say about that? They're doing 37%.
Yeah, but it
And
makes sense. Many of them are single mothers who need a form of secondary income, so it makes sense.
one way or the other, getting there. However, so the 8%, right? So 15% in the larger population and 8%, in other words, 15%, double. I'm talking about the male and female cooperation, it seems. There's more male and female cooperation in the larger society than in the Black community
And
here. It
and
seems.
which also makes sense, right?
Am I reading
So
too much into that?
no, it makes sense because think about it, right? Most male female ownership, it's most likely going to be a family business where there's a husband or wife or something like that, or an ex or something. Usually, men and women don't go in business most of the time as Platons. Uh, so yeah, I would say there's less likely relationships happening in black families, and that's why that number is lower. So to me, the number makes sense. It's something I would have predicted if I didn't see that number.
Hmm. So we have a check-in for you talking about investing in Africa. Um, I'm continuing the question about advice, right? And this question of investing and then investing in Africa, I think that in order to get there,
Okay.
I'll
So
start giving some advice, and I want you to kind of continue. I'm sorry, am I? Can you hear me?
no,
Let me
go ahead.
stop
I
sharing
think
my
we're a little
screen.
bit delayed a bit. So
Okay. So, well, yeah, I think definitely there's a delay. So we're gonna land the plane on this notion here. I think first of all, you need to cross the investment knowledge gap, investment knowledge valley. In other words, it's like shout out to O'Shea or all these other people who go to Africa and immediately point out that, hey, you can't come to Africa dusty with your last $6,000 and think that you're gonna become king of. It's like, no, this does not happen
Right.
anywhere in the world. By the way, I like to use the thermodynamic example of, the heat and there's no place where there's just concentrated heat, easy for you to just go get the warmth. No, it flows out of there. Okay, people are going to
Yep.
put their ice cold pipes in there and get that heat out. That's how the economy works. So you can't just think, oh, if I'm not successful over here, I don't have my way of tapping into the heat or creating heat myself, having some skills, some savvy, some know-how, investments and fun and capital or way of replenishing, blah, 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 relationships, such and such. Oh, I could just go over there and there's free heat in that volcano over there in Africa. No, it's freezing in that volcano. Okay, it's been sucked dry. Everything,
Right.
you got to go grind your heat out. So, to his point, okay, what are the advice after knowing that? Yes, first thing you got to do is get your level of skill and know-how up,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
More than
So
if you were to stay in the United States. Anyways, go ahead.
the first advice is don't invest in anyone else's scheme. If someone tells you, I have this farm, I've got 200 chickens, and this is how much eggs I'm selling a month on this, I want to expand, and don't do it. Right? You're not an investor. And this is actually a perfect example of why US protects their citizens, right?
Build a
It's because
vertical. If you're gonna do something in Africa, make it a vertical, right? Basically,
right.
what you're saying. It's like, don't go invest in part of somebody's agribusiness. Go in there, buy your land, grow
Yep.
your feed, grow the
Mhm.
this, do the that, and then raise the poultry and you sell it yourself.
Exactly. And you have to be there. So the other thing in Africa is you cannot rely getting stuff done by leaving someone. Now you can train someone and give them responsibilities until they prove at each level to be competent, right? And of course, that's still a risk. At a certain point, maybe they might think, the money I'm handling right now is more than I'll ever make in this whole business. So they run away with it. So the point is, you have to just kind of build that trust with the people that you're working with until they shown competence at the level that you want them to reach. You can't just, let's say, for example, you build a poultry farm, it's doing good, and then let's say the animals need, I'm just going to give some examples here, right? They need vaccinations, they need a certain amount of food, a specific type of feed for it to get the best kinds of egg in this situation. If you just leave it to some guy you employed who you've not trained and seen, and also put cameras up to make sure that they know they're being watched, they're going to buy the wrong vaccine, maybe one that's actually gone off, and then they all spend one on a really cheap one or buy half the amount of vaccine, thinking that it's going to be okay, because they're not thinking that these things are measured for a purpose. For them, it's like, well, how can I pocket the difference? So your chickens will die, your business will die, and then obviously your spirit will die. So if you want to do any kinds of business in Africa, you need to be hands-on, meaning or I guess you could invest in my company. That's also fine. You can trust me. But in
Yeah,
general,
you see the hands-on thing, true. Um, However, there are ways, and people have kind of mastered ways of being successful at not being at a place, but also making sure that they're laying down the
mhm.
systems and the competency. I think you definitely have to be there.
Yeah, but let's use
Visit
even
when
O'Shea,
when you're
right?
buying the land. You have to be mobile. You have to be
Yeah.
able to go do that stuff. But what I mean
But
is,
let's even use O'Shea, because even O'Shea, he probably believes he doesn't have to be there, but him being there is when the show is actually productive. That's when they're
oh
actually doing all the streams. They're actually marketing
yeah,
things the correct
I
way.
think it's quite interesting because I think 100% you're correct. There's something about this kind of, perhaps there's a personality aspect of what I'm saying. There's personality aspect and everything. But anyways, what I'm saying here is, because my way is to be more of a spider in the middle of a web when I do my operations, is I always find that the initial phase of gathering the information, getting in there deep, right,
Mhm.
gives you a certain kind of hands-on that you know not what not to leave and what to leave to blah blah blah. I know that, hey, I
Right.
can't start this business unless my cousin is there in Kenya, right?
Mhm.
Because why
Exactly.
do you know that? Because you know about the intricacies of the birds and their vaccinations and such and such and such. That, hey, so I
Mhm.
find that in that first phase of getting in there with the knowledge and your hands dirty, I find it a nice way to build a nice web where and such and such, build a nice machinery. With the principle still being, yes, of course, you have to have eyes there, but it doesn't have to be your eyes per se. But, or
Okay.
is that
Yes.
too much of a master level stuff?
See, the issue here, right, is you have a very good eyes on choosing the people around you. So most people don't have those kinds of eyes. Most people just go there, see a human being that seems nice, kind, and genuine, and they do business with them. But in your case, you actually have an intuition for determining, I guess, the quality of the kinds of people that you let in your space. So if that's the case for you, it will work that way. And for the few people that have similar, gifts, and I'll call it gifts, right? Can do it too. But if you're gonna give a generalized information, yeah, anything is possible, but not everything is probable. So for the average Black American or diasporan, I would say you do need to be there by yourself. I'll give you an example. My mom is doing business. She has a school, and she tried to get me to go there, become the headmaster, because, well, some of these people are not loyal. They keep stealing money. They keep, you know, doing crazy, weird stuff with the funds, pretending that the bus doesn't work. It doesn't really matter what they're doing, but because she's not there physically to kind of keep them on track. Because the thing with Africans, and Black people in general, they're not really people that you leave alone. You need to beat them with a rod every
let me
every
let
now
me
and
let me add the next point to it. Number one is this: yes, understanding that you have to be hands-on. Things cannot be left on. There is a definite kind of let's just trust issue there. And number two, you have to give yourself time. So you cannot have this situation whereby, and shout out to O'Shea as well, something else that he mentioned. You cannot just be like, okay, I'm now I'm gone. Now I'm gone. I'm moving. It's like, no, your moving over there is going to be
Yeah.
like a 6-year process, let's say. And the
Right.
setting up of that other thing is going to be a 6 year. You need to have some flow here, right? That's going to be funding the setting up of the other flow over there. So you got to
Hmm.
be like, okay, cool. I'm going to get into this palm oil business, which is
Yeah.
something I'm doing right now, let's say, right? I'm getting into the
Mhm.
palm oil business. But okay, I'm going to go ahead and get machinery, right? I'm going to go ahead and register the business, do all those fees and whatnot. I'm
Mhm.
looking at land to buy for the for the because I'm going to grow my own stuff at some point, and also make it into palm oil, grow my own palms. But for now, I'm going to buy the palms and process it. So I'm going to buy a building and such and such. All these things I'm going to stage, right?
Yeah.
I'm staging it. I'm not in a rush. I'm not going to get into some kind of a trap because I have other sources of funds slash credit slash whatever, right? Um, so you're not just gonna be like, okay, then over a period of 5 years, even okay, now you're like, okay, that business is set up, it's running, and I have had this other way of making my other job remote and mobile or whatever. So and I think I'm
Right.
going to permanently move over there or something like that. It has to be at least 5 year process.
Right.
I,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And also, I think there's one thing we tend to overlook, which I don't think O'Shea quite mentioned it in a very sort of specific way, is skills and competence. A lot of times, what you'll do is you'll realize that the average pay for, let's say, a security guard is, let's say, $80 a month, right? You are going to want to be that, you're going to have a feeling in your head that you should pay that security guard of yours $80 a month when they're guarding something that's worth 500,000. It doesn't make sense. Like, you have to now start thinking, okay, the value of these items I have is this. I do need a camera. I need someone who's loyal, aka someone who's not going to be paid off by thieves to look away or something like that.
100%. Okay, so now we're getting into now that you okay. So now that you have done the right things, such as study the business, and you have set up a system whereby you're gonna slowly move and get the funds, get the capital, set up the systems and whatnot. Then now the business is operating. You have employees. Now you're talking about selecting the employees, number one, and then making sure that they're top notch skilled, but also that they're trained as they go along. Right?
Yeah.
Training is very important, and then that you pay them well. You want to
Yeah.
pay. Your whole advantage here is you want to get the cream of the crop. You're the one that's coming in with the currency that is better than theirs, right? Generally speaking, if you come from the United States, you're coming in with the power of the dollar. You're coming
Yep.
also with a place where credit is relatively easy to access. So you not only do you have your few tens of thousands of dollars, but you have also a few of ten thousands of dollars worth of credit and some other kinds of maybe cash flowing either business or job in the United States, right? So
Mhm.
you don't want to come in and be paying the market rate for the people you want. No, you're going to be like, hey,
Nope.
I have high standards for my selection, and I'm going to be training them as I keep them, and I'm going to make sure that I pay these people what they are worth so that my business runs smoothly.
Yep, and I think the main point there is be extremely selective. Have like a rigorous interview process, depending on what you're obviously selecting for, and then also pay them well. Because then one of the issues that you might land into is you pay someone well, but the person was never qualified, and of course they now feel like they're entitled when they're messing up everything all the time. So yeah, be extremely selective, and then also pay them well. That's going to ensure a much more smoother process. Because I
Okay,
think in your case, I
let's so checking for you is talking about political influence, and there are many ways that one can go about this. Now, obviously, if you have big swinging balls and power to step into certain places and have certain conversations, then you could do that, right? But if you're talking about the average person, okay, because you see the question there, right? If you're talking about how to have this political influence, I think that on a granular level, shout out to the is it Pan African Strikes back? What's his name again? What's his name?
yeah, Brandon.
Brandon. Shout out to Brandon. He was talking about like politics is an influence game. Generally speaking, a lot you want to go to a place that's a democracy, whereby you can influence local politics with local kinds of contributions and whatnot. So you're like, hey, you have a general plan somewhere. And the way I'm answering your question right now, checking for you to give you overall context, I'm talking about business incentives, money, and politics, right? I'm talking about how to align those because you have to come in with a general kind of economic plan that
Mhm.
you want to get in somehow and you want to put some local politician's name on it. You want them to be the one that says, hey, you know what? Mr. X brought in this new borehole program through checking for you, right? Checking for you funded some new basketball court initiative, blah, blah, blah. And that politician, local politician, he wants your whatever
Yep.
$1,000 contribution here, influence it, blah, 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 to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And then maybe he lubricates certain aspects of you being able to set up some other financial / economic aspect there. So this engine, economic engine that you create is what then hooks that relationship. Because otherwise it's just pay me today and bribe me tomorrow, favor for favor, or talks that don't go anywhere. So even if you it has to be some kind of solid economic thing, which hopefully you have one, that is then you and the politicians have their incentives that they respond to, which are also economic and also about putting their name on something. So on a granular level, local level, these are the kinds of things that you can do if you want to actually have a seat at the table, if you will. What are your thoughts about his question? Perhaps also on my response.
Yeah. I mean, so coming, let's say you're coming as an outsider as well. You're gonna have to integrate with become a mafia, basically. I think that's the best way to say it. In Africa, it's more of your face logic. You need to go see some guy's ugly face, introduce yourself, and make yourself useful. Like the best businessmen that I know around in like the smaller cities, everybody knows them. Meaning, if everybody wants to get something, especially that thing is not readily available, they go to that person. That, of course, that means he's got political protection. He's also able to influence the city governors and any city council members in that sort of manner. You become the person who solves problems for powerful or rich people, and I think that's the best and easiest explanation
Yeah,
I
see,
can
because
give it.
they and to land the plane on that, because some people are going to be like, oh, okay, that seems like a tall order. Maybe not checking for you. Checking for you seems like he's out there trying to scale tall mountains and whatnot. However, for the general person, it's like, oh, solve problems. I'm like, okay, we already told you before that you have to have your hot coal generating machine ready. In other words, your economic engine, which has to do with skills, certifications, capital, okay, and your ability to maybe use other people's labor and stuff like that. Your ability to master the factors of production and be a somebody that can make money, right? So if you got that going, you have to understand that rich people have big problems and they need service. They need people to service their yachts. They need people to plan their whatever. There's all kinds of problems that rich people have, and the rich people exist everywhere in the world. And these rich people are also adjacent to power, right? So that's all Kaizo is saying. It's not some kind of crazy, weird little thing you have to find. It's like, oh, what are the businesses that these rich people are patronizing in this particular territory? Is it what is it? Luxury transportation services that they're into? Is it whatever it may be? Right. You want to then target that, and yes, definitely that's a great way to get it adjacent to power, or bring in some new kind of technology or something like that. That is gonna. Anyways, what Kaizo are your final thoughts on everything we've said today? Now we kind of went through the whole landscape of financial literacy, financial literacy, and financial risk,
Don't
talking
get
about the relationship between
don't
the
get
two.
scammed.
Yeah.
Don't get scammed by black YouTubers telling you to buy crypto.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, don't get go. And yeah, in a way, I get what you're saying, and also what Lion Legal was saying earlier about people being scammed. I just have a point of view in terms of when you talk about overall fairness. That look, they're they're way bigger scams, right? Such as, giving people these crazy student loans based on hyper inflated education costs that create zero returns, right? Zero returns meaning you're working at Chipotle after owing them $70,000, right? Getting people into that, or giving these students credit cards, which is something else they do once they turn 18, and selling them that. All those things exist. And if you're going to be screaming about unfairness and people getting scammed, I say, well, let's point there. Those represent higher dollar in aggregate than you buying Shiba Inu because Solo TV told you to get it and you lost some money, right? So don't do either. But I think that one actually is causing a whole lot more trouble than the Shiba
Okay,
Inu.
so let me ask you, in terms of like, it's investments and whether your investments are secure, if that money was given to the young 18-year-old as a loan, as a business loan, do you think as an option of, okay, well, we can finance your education or we can finance a business, and we'll make sure that it's not some crazy drawn out perfect business plan, but practical one. Do you think that that would be a fair alternative?
Can you repeat that?
So, would you think it would be better then to give 18-year-olds two options? One, either the money is for your education, or it's for a business or venture that you have, or skills training.
Yeah, there's something called in general. I like the idea of when people get born, they open up an account, the government that and is some kind of is based on U.S. Treasuries and stuff like that. That starts amassing some amount of money for them, such that right after high school, they have a certain amount ready. And 18 years is a long time. And if you look at the budgets of certain kinds of things, these are fractions that we're talking about, right? We're not talking about a lot of money, and we're talking about putting it in a system. We're putting it in that banking, treasury system, blah blah blah. It's doing its thing in there, and then when they turn 18, then part of that money could be what you're fund that education process, or a business process, some apprenticeship process, and that could perhaps be in a structured way as well. And there will be businesses formed around that, right? These businesses that will be like, okay, hey, when your child turns 18, register with ADP Development. We take that money and we make sure he does X, Y, and Z with it, that kind of thing, right? And
Right.
one could imagine such a system, that because it's so overall, that'd be my position.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. It's established. It reduces the risk of the young Dusty just going to Vegas without money and defaulting on his loans because things like that. So yeah, it makes sense actually. So, but it gives more freedom, and also in terms of like let's say becoming a primary investor, and I think a test is fine. This test to enter the bar to become a medical practitioner. I think any sort of fear on tests like this is unwarranted because it's not a social thing. This is actually a technical thing which you can easily put. You can make a book and you sell the. It's just like driving license. You make a book, you sell the book, and you make a test. So I think any fears surrounding tests from what happened, civil rights situation, it's probably it's short lived. It doesn't make sense. And I would say actually make it even easier. One of these people from the SEC should have an interview process with you, making sure you understand all the risks that you're about to enter. Now that even makes it more expensive, meaning yeah, you don't need to have $1 million or whatever it is earning potential, but you do need to actually pay for the time of that SEC member to come and basically do the checks with you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, very well put. Okay. Is crypto dead in the United States? Whom benefits from that? There are many conspiracy theories, none of which we touched on, but I'm sure you can get those
Or China,
elsewhere. What do you mean? You said China? Okay.
I think
Uh,
everyone's against China.
you see, some may think that cryptocurrency benefits China, and that's why the United States is kind of going pushing against it, trying to kill Bitcoin because maybe Bitcoin is a Chinese or Russian, maybe Satoshi is in Russia or something like that. But there's just the general idea also of, hey, if you're Jamie Dimon and you are the CEO of the largest bank, JP Morgan, and your friend Gary Gensler from Goldman Sachs, whom fund this Senator Elizabeth Warren. You guys are not into things that are going to upset the apple cart with regards to fiat currency and your control of it. And if you are in this kind of there's at least, I believe, $7 trillion worth of friction money. We're talking about heat, right? Part of the heat and economic juice that gets created has to do with friction in the financial services. So somebody takes a little piece of your money when you want to transfer money from the United States to, let's say, Africa, or something like that, right? And
Mhm.
these rails generate 7 trillion every year worth of nice heat and friction, and that's somebody's money. Okay. All right. That
Right.
guy is not in the business of trying to let that money disappear. Make it
Mhm.
cold, reduce the friction, allow for these transfers with XRP and all these other kinds of things. They're like, no, 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 no. We don't like that. If it's going to be digital, we want it to be our own CBDC and our own rails, okay, and so on and so forth, right? Even all the way up to the whole SWIFT system, whereby it becomes a geopolitical thing, whereby you sanction other people by Russia, for example, and so on and so forth. So those conspiracy theories abound, and you can go in there. But ladies and gentlemen, it is the end of this week's installment. Okay, we've come to the successful end of another installment of Case Closed. Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You have any departing words there? I know you already gave your closing thoughts, but now you have closing words.
Be black, buy black, be right
Wow.
back next week.
Wow. Let me see here. Let me see. Let me see here.